I do it. We're live, and I can hear you.
Oh, hey, Claire. Yes, I'm on my cell phone because I've had an issue with my computer. I got to buy a new computer to stream, but my cell phone should still have good quality.
Yeah, I hear you loud and clear.
Oh, I was just
But you're
finishing
kind of
typing.
off sideways. You're sideways. Yes, that's better.
I was just typing a message if that was coming in the background. But did you do an intro or something, or did you have a title of the stream?
I put Duva discusses E. Michael Jones on Khalid Safir with a tag, so that people can go there, go to his channel to see it. So you did watch E. Michael Jones on Khalid's channel on Sunday.
Oh yeah, I watched it. I mean, I've been streaming with Khalid for a while.
Mm-hmm.
On Sundays at that time. I mean, we didn't stream this last week and last week because he had you and E. Michael Jones on. That's fine. I mean, I don't need to stream every week. And he's the only one who's really asked me in months, besides for maybe a few Twitter spaces. Uh, yeah, I think it's similar to, I mean, Khalid is like a Muslim Charles Moskowitz in the sense
Yes,
that,
I know. He talks at you, doesn't
well, I mean,
he? He talks at
yeah,
you. You're just there to be talked at.
he likes voicing his opinion on things that he doesn't have expertise. And so really, like, the whole point of him largely having a guest is to prompt himself to give his own views on the questions he's asking his guest. And that's fine. Like I said, probably over half of streamers, that's how and why they do it, because they like hearing their own voice. But in that, like, E. Michael Jones is a legitimate theologian. He was a professor. He's an author. I mean, he's an old man. He's a scholar of our generation and has a lot to say. I mean, relatively, like, I mean, Khalid is kind of like your average Muslim guy that just likes his religion. Kind of like the same of the other space. What's the difference
Mm-hmm.
between like Khalid and the other space? They're kind of just like lay intellectuals that are basically like business family men that like promoting and debating Islam, but they're not serious scholars. And I think that's obviously, like, it doesn't matter. You don't have to be a serious scholar to stream, and serious scholars aren't usually that popular streamers. But just from I didn't really learn much because it was basically E. Michael Jones trying to explain theological concepts, and it wasn't sure if Cleed was like comprehending them or getting the point, and then kind of going back to generic Muslim talking points that, to a large extent, I've already heard multiple times over my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And even like
Yeah.
the place you just invited me on, like, I was listening, is like, I mean, maybe they're good kids and everything, nice guys if I had more time, but like all that was just like generic Muslim talking points that at this point, even though I'm a Jew, I've heard 100 times over decades now.
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
and like maybe I'm good memory, so to me it's just annoying. Like, I know this shit even if everyone else doesn't have such a good memory, but I mean, thank God I do. So it's just like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't really want to spend so much time listening to this, like, Islam 101. Even like Daniel Kachu, any of these people, they might perform a good service. The most best service is the people who repeat the 101 class over and over again, but I'm not much for that.
No. Well, I hope we'll have a better dialogue than that. So, the thing about E. Michael Jones is that, you invite him on and you can just sort of lie back and not say anything, and you'll get a 1 hour lecture and off he goes. So I've had complaints about, oh, you keep interrupting, the E. Michael Jones, how dare you? And I thought, well, if I don't stop him, maybe a lot of his ideas are not that clear to ordinary people, such as categories of the mind and categories of reality. In many ways, I think he's kind of wasted on the dissident right who don't get his ideas. And, who only understand that he has an axe to grind with Jews, but his more subtle ideas goes way above their heads. And they're still angry with him for denying the existence of race.
No, I mean, E. Michael Jones, like, has recognizable, unique greatness that, I mean, should be obvious. Like, he's obviously a genius of genius, well-read. He's written tons of books. Like, even if you disagree or have legitimate criticisms of him, like, he is a scholar, and but I would categorize him as actually an activist and believer, because, like, I mean, he sent me his book for free, and he talks to you and Cleve. Like, he's like me. And most true believers, they talk to anybody who reaches out to them. You see Michael Jones, who actually has a huge audience, like Charles Moskowitz, to some extent, like, the biggest share of his audience were the people who tuned in to hear E. Michael Jones. And when he stopped having E. Michael Jones on his audience, but I mean, E. Michael Jones has relatively a pretty big following. I'm saying he's a legitimate big figure, regardless of whether you agree with his views or his views. And in terms of, like, he's not even like me. Like, he's a PhD. He was a professor at, like, Notre Dame. So, like, I'm a smart guy. I've read a lot of books. But, like, he was actually a professor at Notre Dame, and in a lot of these issues, like abortion, and he's traveled the world, like, IRL. So, I mean, he's not just like in a non-internet voice position. He's been going to these conferences around the world for decades. So, just the fact that he was willing to go on Khalid's show is a sign of his character, that I'm saying, like, no, he is probably a true believer, that, like he, in a sense of being like a doomsday prophet. And like, because I did listen to the show, and what he said at the end about, like, okay, like, end of the day, what could Muslims and Christians do together? And E. Michael Jones says, first, we have to come to agreement baseline on limiting harm, especially innocent people. And I mean, so, I mean, but I'm saying, like, there's no, I can't imagine E. Michael Jones doing this any other reason than he believes in it.
Oh yeah,
And I mean, because, like, I think his son's like a multi-millionaire businessman. Like, his kids went to Harvard. Like, I don't think he's doing it for the money. Like, he's a true believer. He's a preacher, and he's almost, like, from a religious sense, he's the real deal, because, like, he will grant an hour even to a nobody just because he wants to convince him, saves a single soul.
Yeah, I got an interview with him without really trying too hard. So this is what he does. But shall I just mention that he's not a theologian? He's a professor of American literature. So he talks about and he specialized in Nathaniel Hawthorne. I don't think he's a theologian.
Yeah, I mean, he's a
musician. It's in American literature.
Yeah. So, but I'm saying he's a legitimate, like, celebrity. He's not just an e-celebrity. You could say he has a disrepute.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm saying he's the legitimate celebrity, not even just a. Yeah, I'm saying, like, he's got a Wikipedia page. He's on the ADL. He's been on the ADL top 10. He's a big name personality that is, like, completely in a bigger league than, say, me, you, or Khalid. But yet he is one of the that will accept and appear on your show, even if you're a nobody. And that, yes, I'm saying that, to me, sounds like to his credit, and that gives him more credibility, that I think whatever he's doing, he's a believer in, and he's somewhat like, I mean, I think in his own mind, because, like, I probably also suffer like a Messiah complex. So if you say, let's say, Duvid and E. Michael Jones, we don't have the same Messiah complex, but we suffer both from a Messiah complex, and he literally thinks he's saving the world. And so he's actively, like, he'll do whatever he can on any battlefront, and he's leading this battlefront from what he feels is needed to save the world from imminent destruction, largely caused by our own sins. In that sense, I agree with him, where, like, E. Michael Jones, I mean, did you watch the whole thing?
Yes, I did. But before I forget, didn't you complain that his book cost too much? I remember on the Brundle cast, you were talking to him, and you said, but he sent it to you free in the end, did he?
we were talking about usury, and then like at some point in the show, I was like, talk about usury, like your books like are way too expensive. And then E. Michael Jones like said like some sort of like you're trying to Jew me down. And maybe I asked like, do you have some sort, like, can I get a discount? And then he did end up, he said like, okay, send me your address, and he did it up sending for free. And that guy, Mistopheles on Mask or whatever, that used to be around, made a clip of that. And so that clip of that interaction became viral and got thousands of views. That was the most remembered thing, where like I was like, talk about usury, look at the prices of your book, and then he was like trying to Jew me down. That was a viral clip, and that you could still find. Like that clip, I think you could still find.
Oh, good.
But
Now we've cleared that up.
the discussion was more intellectual and dry and boring.
Yes, I mean, I often wonder how many people actually understand what he's saying, with his categories of mind and categories of reality. And he said a whole bunch of stuff that I'm sure Khalid had no idea. Went straight above Khalid's head.
Probably. Well, I mean, so it was not only you have no idea, he probably wasn't even curious. And maybe from E. Michael Jones' perspective, it's gotten so bad that Christians and Muslims need to come to some sort of temporarily truce to limit the harm to innocent civilians that the current reality is in. And I mean, that I think is new. Like, I mean, I've been listening to E. Michael Jones for years, and actually, like, I mean, I kind of like the fact that E. Michael Jones gave almost all the similar criticisms that I give to Khalid. Like, well, what is God trying to teach? Like every single time, like I'm with them, but you never ask, like, what is God trying to tell us? And so, like E. Michael Jones, like was kept on, well, what's the message God's trying to tell us from that? So it's like I thought we're a believer, we believe in God. Why you keep on giving me like this and this theory of sociology? What is God trying to teach us? And that's why I'm always pushing Khalid in, and he's always skirting the issue. And so, I mean, if you notice that E. Michael Jones pushed him the exact same way, whereas he was kept, well, what is God trying to teach us? But I guess, due to the stature of E. Michael Jones, Khalid actually let E. Michael Jones speak and explain his view on that.
Yes, I mean, I did complain when I was talking to him. It's like, no, I will not come to your channel to be talked at and, be moved on when, and it was very frustrating. But what E. Michael Jones was saying was that Muslims have been sent by God to punish sinners. And I saw that Khalid
Well, I mean,
was taken aback a little, wasn't he?
Well, yeah, I've heard this argument for years, and but I'm saying it's a meta-karmatic argument that at this point Khalid's mind frame is just doesn't comprehend. So I mean, and it's saying, because like it's from the God's eye perspective. We're not talking politics. We're not talking like economics. We're talking God's eye karma perspective. Like society, people in society A punish sin in a certain way, like God forbid abortion, and the punishment them comes in getting replaced by Muslims, which is
this is what
like,
Rabbi Mizrahi says too about Jews, and Arabs. He said
well, I'm saying
the Arabs are there to
if you're
punish us for our sins.
if you're superstitious, like, and half of people are superstitious, that's just how people talk. They believe. I mean, like I was said, like even in university, if you ask patients the cause of their sickness, the most common globally answer is the evil eye. Or like, oh, what happened? Oh, I got the evil eye. And but people in their own perspective, how they understand things are happening. Most people are superstitious, or majority, and could see something like, yeah, like I sin and I'm punished in some random way through an unrelated event. So like that logic from but lead, and I'm not even sure if you're like Church of Entropy, like her mind would definitely like straight, that makes sense. Like yes, the British are getting punished. Of course, the British are getting punished, and the British are getting punished for a whole bunch of things. And one way to punish the British is to send people like you there.
Yes.
I mean, right? What could be more to the British than like for you to be there and to be in charge of them? It's like not only do they have to live with you in their glorious city, like you actually outrank the majority of them. Like, what could be more punishment than that?
Well, it reminds me of the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28, curses for disobedience. You know, you won't know if you're coming or going. You know, when it's morning, you'll wish it was night, and when it's night, you'll wish it was morning, and you know, blah blah blah. And finally, you'll be sold to slaves, but nobody will want to buy you. Um, there's a comical element in it, I think.
Well, I mean, it's like, I mean, you saw the Nicholas Fuentes Tucker Carlson interview that just happened yesterday.
Yes.
Okay, I mean, it finally.
And Fuentes was saying it's feminism that's the cause. I don't think he blamed Jews particularly, or maybe I was asleep when he said that, but I caught the end when he was talking about feminism, gender relations, and porn.
They actually didn't talk about Jews at all. They did talk about.
Really? Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure the topic of Jews did not come up. I mean, they talked about like Christian Zionism and Israel and support for Israel, and maybe it was an agreement or something beforehand, and it wasn't particularly eventful. Like there wasn't anything breaking, but like it finally happened. You know, Fuentes has hit the mainstream, but like to scholars, it's like I told Charles Moskowitz, there is almost no complaint against Judaism that E. Michael Jones says that like wasn't part of the disputation in Paris in like in the 1200s, and Fuentes and E. Michael Jones are factually largely giving the sentiment of pre-Vatican II Catholicism, but really they're not a one-issue person like anti-Semitic. They have a whole slew of issues, and one of those issues is you know, basically limiting Jewish power in America. So I mean, clearly E. Michael Jones and Nicholas Fuentes, from a Jewish perspective, you could argue have an anti-Semitic agenda because one of their ideas is limiting Jewish power in the West. However, like I would speculate that that's only a portion of their platform, and largely they're both Catholic, Zionist to that extent. Like they're thinking about general Catholic end of days or utopian visions for society would find, and like general, I would expect, like as a useful, scholarly, well-behaved Jew, I would probably actually be given a privileged status in E. Michael Jones or Nicholas Fuentes set up society. Although it would be like Islam, like Joseph Cohn, would be like secondary, where like I would be a Jews in Islamic society where Jews would be have a stable position in the upper middle class management class, but be restricted from positions of power, which has largely been the case in where Jews have prospered, under that. Okay, like I'll be
You're roboting a bit.
I just don't get.
Oh,
you okay? You can come on. You hear me now? Test,
yeah,
test.
Yeah, yes, but I don't know, something that you can help, just to make sure. I mean, if you can help it, that would be great. If you're holding in a particular way that makes it robot. Yes. Sorry, what were you saying?
Well, I was just kind of rambling on how E. Michael Jones and Nicholas Fuentes were representing a kind of mainstream pre-Vatican II Catholic position, and how they do have a strong anti-Semitic element where they do want to limit Jewish power in the West, but overall their agenda is not particularly anti-Semitic. And I think even with their desire to limit Jews from positions of power, being in power over them, that they would still largely allow Jews to have a management position or upper middle class position, as long as that didn't mean like we were had so much control like we do. So like an overall perspective, I never thought E. Michael Jones were that anti-Semitic.
Well, I remember him saying that if it were up to him, he would conduct an inquisition and forcibly convert Jews to Catholicism. And then he said darkly that Jews were not the only people he would forcibly convert to Catholicism, because, well, of course, he has his eye on the Protestants, because I think his entire position is that,
What
we
you might
Catholics, we knew what to do, we knew how to treat the Jews, and then the Protestants came along and you started being nice to the Jews, and now the West is in its rotten state, and it's because of you, Protestants, Calvinists, Episcopalians, etc. That seems to me to be his position.
Yeah, but even in that position, Jews still had a largely privileged status, and E. Michael Jones and Nicholas Fuentes would likely still protect a somewhat privileged status for the Jews in America. It's just that Jews have so much power that the privileged status that they think the Jews deserve would, be a hit to the current power that the Jews have. But compared to like white nationalists or other things, like you could still they're kind of philo-Semitic.
Well, I really think that a lot of the power given to Jews, or that people think Jews have were given by the Gentile to Jews, and I think it would be quite easy for Jews to lose their power if the American Empire said, right, we're just interested in the landmass from the South Pole to the North Pole, and that's it. We don't care about Israel. It's too costly for us to administer. We're just going to leave it, leave it to the people there. If the Jews don't want to come, maybe, but we're not going to spend any more money on Israel. That could happen in theory if I think Trump has this idea of streamlining the American empire and making it into a kind of land empire, or a vaguely landish empire, instead of this global empire that must be very costly to administer, and it would be self-sufficient in energy, wouldn't it? And then it could launch its missiles in the Arctic at Russia, should it so choose.
Well, I mean, America and the world are going through extremely difficult, bad situations, but relatively, you could make many arguments why it's pretty good to be in America compared to most other places in the world, despite the tremendous difficulties America's going through, and certainty on certain to what's going to happen in the future. Just like you have elections coming up. Mandami is almost certainly going to win the election for mayor. That's coming up already next week. The shift of support for Israel. There's a whole bunch of tides that could be changing, and they could change quite a bit. Where you could see, but to some extent, like life happens locally, and people's opinions on these things don't actually affect their day-to-day life, and people's success in day-to-day life has almost nothing to do with their views or opinions on larger political or philosophical issues, but like how well they conduct themselves in task-based functions locally.
Mm. I mean, what I was proposing is that, currently secular Jews seem to have a lot of power because the
Well,
West, being
the
mainly
misnomer.
secular, prefers to big up secular Jews, and there are more of them. While I guess religious Jews are not going to be terribly useful to the American empire, since they don't even want to join the IDF or the police force, and they're a kind of burden on the secular state of Israel, because they don't do anything other than learning Torah, which is kind of annoying when you want it to be a working colony, Jews joining the police and armed forces and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at it from a current technocratic status, like you can't use words like power; they're a misnomer. But the things that might go into what you would call power could be broken up and categorized, and Jews that are generally always collectively worried about their collective status, or working as a group for certain things, like in recent decades, mainly Israel. Power doesn't exist in the US, positions of power exist. And what matters is who fills those positions of power. But the people don't actually have the power. They just temporarily occupy the position of power, and then they can enact or legislation or law. And then Jews have advantage not because they have power, but largely because of a rules-based order. And if you're even not being too conspiratorial, you could see that Jews are highly involved in the creation of the rules-based order, and that you could argue that the rules-based order is created in a way that maybe benefits Jews, but the rules-based order does not necessarily have to be carried out by Jews to benefit Jews. Like like in the U.S. or England, you could pass legislation that most people never heard about, and then all you need to make sure that's being done is that the rule is being locally enforced, where Jews might be well informed about this stuff, other people are not. So you say, oh, Jews have a bunch of power, but there's a technocratic statement to the power to say, like, well, this rule is on the book, and there's a mechanism to having it enforced. And essentially Jewish power is still mostly in wealth and prestige, especially in the US, where money has such a big influence in elections and the possibility to sway elections or public. And like, now that I'm more functioning locally, I would say like, I don't know if you remember the very first argument that I was on when I was on Luke Ford, the essential prestige of the Jews in the West is actually because the Jews produce very good doctors, and at the end of the day, people like their doctors and they trust their doctors. So I mean, Jews are in a lot of fields like banking or that, but like, still in America, Jews are still like 10% of doctors, and there's just a certain like trust level or prestige that, I mean, Khalid did not seem to appreciate this, because I was saying, like, I'm not sure if you watched that episode, talking about why, even though most American Jews support genocide in Gaza, why that doesn't affect their stature in America, because like, generally in America, you're judged professionally separate from your personal life, and you're professionally judged on your task-based performance. So even if a doctor was like Zionist and supporting genocide, that would, if they still were professionally excelling at the task performance of being a doctor, most people aren't going to care about their politics. And like, in the societies generally set up that you want the best doctor, you don't care what the doctor's politics are, and you determine who the best doctor is based on their ratings. And doctors unrated on how well they perform medicine, not their politics. And so there's often the best rated doctors are actually like known jerks and have low character, but it doesn't affect the fact that they're the best rated doctors that all the people want to go to if they have a problem. And so in that sense, I don't really see the Jews losing their prestige, because like, Jews excel at task-based performance. Jews are generally always going to tier towards the upper middle class, like within Jewish identity, and Jews will, like, in terms of wealth and like, however, like, at some point, society, like, rising anti-Semitism, and especially like, genocide, like war crimes, like, we're in deep trouble. And Israel right now, they're expanding the war, but like, at some point, there could be a reckoning, and I don't think it's going to be good. And so in that, I'm in agreement with E. Michael Jones, and I think it largely is caused by our own sins. So it's like, I'm not an anti-Semite, God forbid. However, I do, as a Jew-loving person, think that like, we are on the wrong path, and God is going to severely punish us for it.
Have you heard of Caleb Morpin? Are you familiar with that name? And possibly not, but he used to be an RT journalist, and has a YouTube channel, and he is a political commentator. And what he said about anti-Semitism, I thought was quite interesting. He said that the criticisms level at Jews is that they are middle class. They are, accountants, doctors, dominate academia, as you would the middle class to do. And he was theorizing that perhaps it was just a class hatred, because in China during the Cultural Revolution there were no Jews, but the middle classes got it in the neck. Academics, business people, landlords, and the like. figures of authority got it in the neck during the Cultural Revolution. And I suppose when there is a revolution, the traditional representatives of authority, such as judges, would get it in the neck.
Well, yeah, and I said that on Luke Ford when I first came on, that like, generally, and I was trying to explain to Khalid like the boom bust cycles, and even without anything mystical or bad about the Jews, just because Jews usually tear towards management, even in the Nathan Kaufman's worldview, where it's just because Jews have higher IQs and are concentrated in urban areas, when there's revolution, there doesn't need to be any other reason than that the Jews are going to get hit the hardest and first, because most revolutions aim to overthrow the leadership, and Jews tear towards the leadership. So, I would take a purely rational. You don't need anything more added on to that. And most of the other conspiracies actually come like the supernatural belief from Christianity or the Bible that the Kaufmanist critique is not sufficient, and you need, like Adam Green, like the Jews have to be this like mythologically powerful enemy that is indefeatable because they're devilly strong, as opposed to universal character traits that
To justify the anti-Semitism, I suppose. It's like they're uniquely indestructible and cunning, and we really have to watch out for them because they're magic and special and God's chosen people, that kind of thing. And the anti-Semites will have to hold on to that narrative, because if Jews were ordinary and all the time they were mistaken, they'll look a bit stupid.
You got to break it down to the logic. Okay, if like Elliot's in the chat or somebody's going to push back, he's like, not me. I'm a Jew and I don't feel like that. But if you're looking like, there's a collective Jewish group strategy that pushes for certain things that are against the common interest of other groups, and specifically in America, where the structure of America has allowed Jews to amass extreme amounts of wealth and prestige, that it's very easy for Jews to convert that wealth and prestige into political power through making donations or recruiting politicians and getting them to run, or various factors that are completely allowed within the U.S. legal system. But that creates a bad situation for other groups in America, that Jews are just acting their collective interest of using their wealth and prestige to push the U.S. to do things that in foreign policy that are not in the interest of the majority of the citizens. And at a certain point, we'll be disastrous because we're killing tens of thousands of people, in the sense that 10% of doctors in America are Jews. However, half of those Jewish doctors are donating money and leveraging their prestige to support Israel's actions. And that will have a fallback, even if the doctor remains being a good doctor and is not, fallen on, they haven't messed up their actual job. But it's like, yes, you did use your status, wealth, and position in America to push for this disastrous foreign policy that has negatively affected the lives. I mean, besides with actually killing all these people in these foreign wars, but has negatively affected the life of all Americans for basically no reason other than the fact that Jews decided to collectively leverage their wealth and status, prestige in America, to get America to extend their foreign policy in a way that benefits larger Jewish-Israeli interests.
I think
I agree with that, but it's in general, that's an anti-Semitic point of view, even though Nicholas Fuentes and E. Michael Jones or Richard Spencer and a lot of people Pat, that's basically how Pat Buchanan, that's how Catholics always felt. And so because I'm willing to say that's kind of true, I'm in the boat together with what has been basically classified as pure anti-Semitism.
A thought keeps coming and going about it's come and gone, but we've got somebody in the chat, so we'll see if he's all right.
Get a dissident Jewish opinion on it.
Okay, a troll. Well, I got rid of him pretty quickly.
Well, I
So,
needed that rebuke. Come on, bring it back on. Like, give me that rebuke. Have it. You're a disgrace, David. You're a disgrace to the Jewish people. I cannot believe that she's platforming this joke of a Jew.
oh yes, it's come back now. So the late Rabbi Sachs once said that if you overprivilege Jews, the Gentiles will hate us. And he was kind of saying, don't do it. Maybe we don't deserve it. And there seems to be a deliberate policy of Western governments to overprivilege Jews. And maybe they are deliberately causing provoking the anti-Semitism, such as the ADL, because I know some Jews saying we've been accused of anti-Semitism when we've questioned Zionism. And I noticed that increasingly a lot of diaspora Jews not living in Israel would want to distance themselves from Zionism, as you have, and another Jew I know, Jacob Faturecci, he's done that too. But that's understandable. If you're never going to live in Israel, you don't want to be taking the flag for Israel's policies on the Palestinians. So I think Jews might be a little divided on the matter, depending on where they live and where they intend to stay forever.
I mean, just to make a point of, I mean, there's some level of meritocracy, but how it plays in, because like, okay, I'm involved locally, and I'm doing chess coaching. I don't know if you get IC3 or something popping around. Be interesting to talk to him about that. But there's a clear demographics where in locally, like the top schools by far are these international Asian schools that are mostly made up like of Indians or Chinese or a few others. But like in terms of like, chess performance and like test performance, there's no comparison. Like there were no schools when I was a kid, maybe a handful of small private schools. But like the demographics. And so I was at like a chess tournament this weekend. I'd never seen the demographics like that in my life. Like it was like 80% Indian. And to some, like that's just pure meritocracy. And then I knew a lot of those Indian people I was talking to, like, and like they wanted to know like how to get their kids into the top schools, and they want their kids to become doctors, and it's very competitive. And I was, because I was I guess friendly enough to tell them like straight up, I was like, the reality is like your kid's gonna have to do better because he's Indian. Like your kid is gonna have to get like 100 points better test scores, because there's going to be reverse Asian discrimination, at least to the meritocracy for acceptance or how you become a doctor or the various professions. But like Jews, to some extent, like the Kaufman's hypothesis of living in urban areas and higher IQ, gain power and prestige largely through meritocracy. However, the cycle, once Jews get that power and prestige, they tend to leverage that power and prestige for their own group interest. And often that works out to be disastrous, especially when it is in the direct opposition to the group interest of, so to say, the host society. And, that was like, John Mersheimer and the Israel lobby, or, something like, certainly most people are recognizing Zionism as that, saying you could say, I like Jews, and I don't know why they have this sickness, why they're pushing for this like genocide or these nonsensical foreign policy decisions, but I want no part of it. And like, I don't want to be called an anti-Semite for saying that. And I don't want to be called an anti-Semite for like saying the obvious, that like for some reason Jews feel like this, even like intelligent, rational, generally compassionate, like they they really care about this like irrational, disastrous foreign policy.
Yes,
And
I think instinctively, because so much hatred is generated by all the the atrocity porn that we see on X. It's not surprising that if you don't live in Israel, you would not want to be associated with it. And from a few of the streams of rabbis living in Israel, I don't know if you follow David Bar Hayim, who's very very anti-Arab, really, but he's saying, well, a lot of the Jews, they seem to have an inferiority complex. They obviously hate the war. They can't bring themselves to do all these things. They're traumatized by the war, and they don't want to do it anymore. And they don't even want to live as Jews, and
Yeah,
that.
the problem the problem
He
is
makes them sound like Gentiles in the West.
yeah, I mean the problem is it's too late now because like Jews are already complicit in genocide and they've already dragged the West into it. I've been giving like the mafia example, like God forbid, when you get initiated into the mafia, um, they kill somebody in front of you and then put your fingerprints on it and say, and say basically you better not talk because like God forbid they're going to blame the murder on you, and that's basically what Israel did to the West with the genocide in Gaza. They basically killed those people in front of everybody and put our fingerprints on it in a way that we're implicated. And now it's too late because you're talking like, yeah, people are trying to distance themselves 2 years into the genocide. Like me and like I've been around talking about this for 20 years. Like Michael Jones has been around warning about this for like decades, and now saying Nicholas Fuentes really sounds like a pretty good, reasonable guy right now, considering that the Jews actually committed genocide. I'm saying, like 5 years ago, you could have seen, like, okay, Nicholas Fuentes, he's an unhinged anti-Semite, like the guy'd be crazy. But like now that it actually turns out that like Israel killed like probably upwards of 100,000 mostly innocent people, you're gonna have to like think like maybe Nick Fuentes was right the whole time, or E. Michael Jones, in saying these people are actually relatively protective of Jews, and it's almost like because they're saying it's a supernatural force or something. It really is hard to explain because, like, I mean, relatively, I'm a Jewish scholar, and I know, like, I mean, over half the people I know are Jews, and almost all of the Jews I know disagree with me, and they don't care that I'm a Jewish scholar. They don't care that like I could explain all this stuff. Like they all think that like my screws are loose or something, and you are basically in line. And now, like at this point, 2 years into the genocide, like a handful of people are like, yeah, maybe it wasn't such a great idea. But they're still going forward. Like God forbid they got the hostages back, but like yet some reason they're still resuming the war. You didn't see the poll, like over 50% of Americans like think that Israel is purposely killing people. Like that's
Well,
genocide. Really just
well,
purposely kill people, for no other reason than to purposely kill people.
but talking about Americans, I mean, actually, why not blame the Americans?
What
Because
we
of
are
their unwavering support for Israel. So I mean, there is a saying: every time you point a finger, three more are pointing back at you at yourself when you
yes,
point the finger. at one.
rude.
And,
We're not America is to blame. Like we did it. Like Israel, like in America, our partners. What do you like? Trump is still threatening to do worse to the Gazans than has already been done. It's not. I mean, obviously Israel's doing the majority of it. But like no, America and the UK. I'm God forbid the last few Jewish friends I had for years ago. I just like straight up like dude, you're like there's going to be war crime trials. And it's saying like, no, I mean, the U.S. and the U.K., there are countless parties in the U.S. and U.K. that are 100% complicit in war crimes. Like they know that they're doing things that are just purposely killing countless innocent civilians. And
they're just clearing the area for the new development, right? That's
I
what
mean,
they're doing. So
he
they can
might
have a nice seafront
he might
apartments or something.
have. I mean, I think he's kind of prophetic because he actually wanted to speak to me and change my mind and convince me. Although I don't think it's Jesus. Like honestly, like he wasn't successful in like making me want to become a Christian. But in terms like yes, like you can't sin and get away with it, punishment for sin, or just this like mystical um, mind virus that affects Jews in a certain way where they're just completely oblivious to the consequence of their actions, and like they're still pushing forward. Like most of the Jews I know right now, they're not even worried about like whether they're going to get away with it, or like they still like they're still pushing forward. They still think like somehow they're going to successfully. Yeah, I don't even know what they think they're going to do. And it's kind of like anti-Semitism. It's like the mind virus. Like okay, anti-Semitism to some extent is a mind virus. um but there's a like, but I would say like Zionism is really the mind virus. So like that's kind of my like Notori Karta anti-Zionist, and even E. Michael Jones said if all the Jews were like Notori Karta, there wouldn't be any problems. I mean, he said that multiple times. But like, I could largely free the Jews of their responsibility. I mean, not like, okay, if people did war crimes, they did war crimes, God forbid. But I'm saying it's really this heresy of Zionism that Judaism should be salvaged and is largely praiseworthy. And this genocide is not to be blamed on Judaism, but a heresy that arose out of Judaism called Zionism.
But on the question of Zionism, I mean, wouldn't it be okay? I would define Zionism as the idea that Jews deserve a homeland, and surely the desire of Jews to return to Israel after their expulsion is only natural, because the moment you're expelled, you desire return. So maybe Zionism is, kind of natural. So if you think Jews deserve a homeland, I mean, you could ask, Pakistani, Chinese, Japanese, or Kurd, or Yazidi. Do you think your people deserve a homeland? And of course, they're going to say yes. And Jews would have the additional excuses that yes, of course, we deserve a homeland. But particularly if the Americans are going to give us their unwavering support. Why the hell wouldn't we think that if America supports us?
Yeah, but I mean, if you were just straight up, like, do these people deserve a homeland, even if it's going to, cause 300,000 people to be killed? And so you could make the calculation, saying the Zionist authors, some of them were straight up and talked about things like that. But if you're saying like, yeah, well, is it worth the homeland if they have to genocide another people? And like, yeah, I mean, certainly a lot of Zionists, they want their homeland, or a lot of Christians or even Muslim Zionists, they're not really concerned with the genocide of the Gazan people. I was hearing from different guests on like the judge, the military experts on the some of the anti-Israel shows like Judge Napolitano and Daniel Davis or Dialogue Works. But many people think that the Abraham Accords with Saudi Arabia are dependent on Israel successfully completing the genocide. That Saudi Arabia has actually, the agreement they had with Israel is, we will normalize with you if you can successfully ethnically cleanse the Palestinians.
What you're
And
saying the Saudis want the Palestinians dead and gone?
no,
Is
that
that what you're saying?
they don't necessarily want that, but they said they would normalize if Israel successfully solves the Palestinian problem, which could include genocide or ethnic cleansing, that Saudi Arabia will normalize with Israel. That
Why do you
Saudi
think
like,
the Saudis want the Palestinians gone?
well, not that they want them gone, but I'm saying that there's really no benefit to the Saudis to siding, other than human rights or morality, to siding with the Palestinians, and there's a lot of benefits to normalization with Israel. And I guess if the Palestinians are gone, even though Israel might have committed a horrific tragedy, um, at least the problem will have been averted, and won't have to be dealt going forward. And God forbid, at the same time, it would be like a mutual agreement, like, you let us commit genocide, we let you commit genocide, and that Saudi Arabia would allow. Oh, let me see if I got a deer in my backyard. Let me see if I could. Can you see?
Oh yes, I can see it moving away, it seems. Or is that oh yes, it's moving away.
Yeah, it's moving
Oh,
away. It just random. I got. It happens like in. I'm not sure if you got deer. I was actually Kevin McCarran in Japan, like live stream, like cutting up a deer. Like, he was driving on the highway and saw a deer that had been like hit by a car, and then like he pulled over to collect the meat, and he live streamed himself, a private live stream, not on like on
what was
Discord. He
skinning
live,
and gutting the thing?
yeah.
Oh wow.
But I guess that's a common thing. Like, I don't know if you've got your Anglo roots and you hunt deer like a good Anglo.
Well, I have shot pheasants, but not been on a deer hunt
Okay, so
or deer stalking,
there goes
I should
audience.
say.
According to Jewish and other mythological lore, a deer is a sign of good luck and prosperity from God.
I
In
see.
terms of
Are
E.
you
Michael
allowed to
Jones,
eat
what is
game?
God? What message is God trying to tell you? And historically, the deer is a sign of God for good signs. So that will bring to clarity, and everybody watching has seen God's sign of prosperity from the deer.
Oh, right. Yes, I
Duvid
think a
is
deer
deeply
would be a
superstitious.
good sign. Yes.
Duvid is a deeply superstitious person and believes in signs. And when I see a deer in my backyard, I get superstitious.
Yes, yes. So you're allowed to eat deer, aren't you? Or is that kosher or not? Are
I'm a
Jews allowed to eat
vegetarian.
game?
No, you can't. I mean, you could. Deer is kosher, but you can't eat game. It has to be shechted, cut with a knife around the neck. It can't be shot. So there is. You could get like kosher venison, although it's not super expensive because you can like raise deer for meat. There are certain farms like buffalo also. Like I'm not. It's not super expensive, but it's pretty expensive. But there
Hmm.
is, these like buffalo, deer, goat, or lamb, various things. They all exist in kosher, but they're not that common, and they're rather
Hmm.
rather expensive. And it's also a thing of the modern realm because now you could raise deer for meat. In the olden days, you maybe if you trapped a deer, um, but I mean generally deer is kosher. Oh, maybe I'm wrong. Deer's not kosher. It's the who said. I have to look it up. I'm sorry. I'm like, in
Hmm.
fact, like I've got so much crap going on in my life. Like I gotta smoke some weed right now. So like my mind is not as sharp as it is because like I'm high and like I gotta
I
get
thought you'd
get stuff.
given it up. I
Well,
thought you'd given up your weed.
I'm like, ironically, like it's completely legal and okay and like
Uh-huh.
destigmatized now. So like, right around the corner from my house, I could buy like super high quality weed, cheap. Like I can't even lose my job for like being high. So like,
Well, you used to
uh,
smoke on while you were streaming, but I see that now you've stopped. But yeah,
well, I started doing it again, but I'm saying, uh, Michigan now has the third largest marijuana market in the world, and it's like super cheap and high quality, and it's literally everywhere. It's like McDonald's, where like there's a weed shop on like every major corner. And so it like I had stopped earlier, but like literally it's like McDonald's now. I like drive down the street and they have like super high quality weed on like literally the corner where I used to go to the drugstore when I was a kid. I'm not joking. Like literally the store, like the corner where I used to go to buy stuff as a kid, like has a marijuana shop there now.
well, I think that's terrible because you know what the British did to the Chinese. It's like, yeah, we were drug dealers, and that there's actually a letter written by some senior Chinese official to Queen Victoria saying, "Do you know what you're doing? How could you allow such a thing, Queen Victoria?" Um, and I don't think she ever got the letter, but it was kind of saying, you know, but anyway, I think. All kinds of distractions are being increasingly legalized because they want us drugged and distracted. So we won't together organize to rid ourselves of our
Well, I mean,
incompetent and corrupt government.
to like the nature of Jewish excellence or Jewish power and the relationship to that to a rules based order. Because Jews don't really have power, Jews have influence in the creation of the rules based order that everybody else lives according to. So it's like no one cares your opinion about like these various issues. And it's, I mean, sometimes you could vote or like, I mean, you might stream or people care your opinion, but there's a process to create the rules that society functions by. It generally, Jews basically focus on that as opposed to things that don't actually matter, like like convincing a bunch of people, like and so like the rules based order, and you could say it's a sign of intelligence because like most people don't even operate to a rules based order at all, let alone to the people who are actively trying to do social engineering at the level of creation of rules based orders. But like in Michigan, first we got gambling like 25 years ago, and now 10 years we've had marijuana. Now we have like mushrooms have been legalized, and it's changed like the rules based order normalcy where it's like it's not even a stigma. It's like smoking a cigarette used to be like and like 1 out of 5 people in Michigan like smokes weed regularly. Like,
Mm.
okay, yeah, that's bad. I mean, it's like pornography. Like pornography has not only been, I mean, marijuana is definitely, at least in Michigan, less stigmatized than pornography.
Well, I think that the hoping that we'll distract ourselves with sex and drugs and rock and roll and not organize ourselves. So that's a plan. It's a shame you can't pass it to me.
Well, what I'm saying, if you're, the plan is to understand what God is trying to tell us and get in line. So, I mean, that if you think E. Michael Jones, like Khalid, probably you has mixed agenda where like he kind of wants to like, I mean, I don't know why he wants to focus on the West so much, or like he want like, or I don't even know why he plays these clips to react to, but like he's got his agenda or whatever he's trying to promote. Um, that might be similar to like Charles Moskowitz or a lot of various streamers in like in a general promotion of Islam and promotion of himself and networking and social engineering, but Western focused. I'm more an intellectual. I like ideas, theology, talking to people to get to a deeper understanding of the issue itself. And so, like, disagreement could be beneficial. And, like, as I get older, um, I'm becoming like, I'm generally conflict avoidant. And as I'm getting older, I'm becoming more and more conflict avoidant. So I care less and less about, like, the personality and personality battles. But I'm still, like, an ideas geek. And I still like analyzing uh, the issues, and I still like the public appearances of celebrities. Like E. Michael Jones is known from his books. Like E. Michael Jones is a major thinker, and even if he is like counter-Semitic, like he's a big name that could be like attached to a worldview and philosophy. And to some extent, like when you tune in, you're tuning in for these big names and their views and their insight, even if it's the opposition. Like even if you're pro-Jewish and you want to know what the opposition is saying, like you could still tune in to like E. Michael Jones to know like what the opposition is saying.
Well, he just basically conflates Jews and lumps them together. Um, and I suppose the religious Jews would be saying in their small voices, it's not us, it's the secular heretical Jews that they're the ones, giving the group a bad reputation. But
Yeah,
we
but
can't control them,
I'm making the
right?
point, E. Michael Jones and like most of the major Jewish podcasters are saying the exact same thing. Like they're shocked. They can't believe the current state of anti-Semitism like, in their life. That people, like Nick Fuentes would be on Tucker Carlson. That people would openly be discussing, God forbid, uh, the negative role of Jews in American life, and there'd be like mainstream public platform. For someone who'd been saying that, so for like E. Michael Jones saying that, um I mean that like I mean you don't agree that like that like E. Michael Jones, like he might be glad it's happening, but like him and Jonathan Greenblatt are like both like the same shock. Like they never expected this. I mean obviously they were both predicting it to some extent. They always expected it, but like when you could hear that they're shocked that we're in this state now.
Yeah, yeah. I'm an anti-Semite I know on X has said, "Wow, anti-Semitism is now mainstream," and I think you would, you would think that if you were on X. Have you heard of somebody called Rudy Rockman? He's a good-looking Israeli guy.
Yeah,
Does that
Sephardi
ring a
guy.
bell?
Yeah, like I mean the one last point on the E. Michael Jones, like to some extent, I fear God. And E. Michael Jones, like on Brundle, he was warning the Jewish people. He was like, you like, I mean, saying like all of those people, like Lucas Gage, Patrick, that the guy who ran for governor, like these people I talked back to on the Brundle cast, like they were warning me. It's like, you guys are messing up. You have no idea what's coming to you. And like at that point, like I was naive, like I didn't really know what was happening in terms of that. But I'm saying like E. Michael Jones was telling me this like almost a decade ago, like when I first talked to him, he's like, you have no idea what you guys are coming into. Like you better change the road. Like it's gonna be really bad for you. And now like E. Michael Jones is saying like, wow, I was right. And like but who knows what's going to happen? Because say like God forbid, like I said, like who would have predicted that? Like I mean, unfortunately, like I predicted. I told you exactly that was going to happen. But I'm saying from the general perspective, no one was predicting that like Israel was going to kill like 100,000 civilians in Gaza.
Yep, but I mean, it's just the bad government that people feel. I guess in the UK, the boat people coming over. But I was talking to Rashma. You were on her channel before, and she was saying, "Wow, the Islamophobia in my neighbourhood is off the scale, and there are all these threatening gangs of white youth who invade mosques and frighten children and women in these mosques, etc. And it's getting so much worse. And there was this demonstration at the weekend. So the police basically separated the groups. Like the Muslims in Whitechapel had their own demos, and they appeared in their masks and looked threatening because they were all male. And in South Kensington and Knightsbridge, there was UKIP leader Nick Tenkomi's demonstration, and I think they were quite well behaved, but they were carrying all these crosses, which is suggesting that there is this return to religion when people are afraid of God knows what. I mentioned Rudy Rockman because I know him to interview people who don't like Jews and kind of take their complaints and ask them how and why, etc. And one of the things he said that was interesting a few years ago was that, well, maybe we're responsible for their bad government. Maybe we are. Or if
Well,
you believe in
like
God,
they're
it could
responsible
be
for
that
genocide.
the Gentile is programmed to hate Jews when they suffer from bad government, and maybe Jews perhaps have it in their power to improve the government of Gentiles by ranking the four Gentile religions, as I keep telling them to do, so they
Yeah,
can
I mean,
have a
when
better religion than
but
Christianity.
I think the Kaufmanist critique of just Jews being having a certain nature to work to stay in urban areas and have higher intelligence, it causes Jews to somewhat excel in, I mean, to basically be a management class. So the element of you don't need like anything supernatural or related to anti-Semitism to say just as a management class, um, being a management class has high risk and high reward. And the high risk is when things are going good, you get paid well, you're doing better than everybody else. And when things go bad, like you're the first one to get hit. And like a lot of people, a lot of Jews I know, like old school liberal American, like successful Jews, like doctors, lawyers, business people, worked hard. That's kind of like just how they saw Judaism. And it was just like kind of like natural, like I mean it was like a Marxist class struggle type thing. But the Jews by definition are part of management.
Yeah, yes, and I think when these anti-Semites complain about Jews, it's sort of like, oh, they're into porn. And I thought, yeah, but what about Gentiles into porn and who make porn and profit from porn? It seems that what they what the law allows for Gentiles, obviously, a few less ethical Jews would do, and these people who complain about Jews seem to just focus like, well, Jews do this and it's really terrible, and as for Gentiles doing it, they get a free pass, and it seems to me that in their minds, even as they complain about Jews, it's almost as if they're saying, we expect better from Jews than to own porn and produce porn and blah blah blah, and it's more shocking and disgusting that Jews are doing these things, and
Well,
you know.
I certainly like I'm philo-Semitic, and to the extent that I mean generally I like Jews on a personal level, judge them favorably, recognize the excellence of Jews, and even though Jews in our group strategy might disagree, like usually I mean even up to like genocide, like I've not let that affect any of my personal um, relationships. However, um, I lost a little bit of track of where I was trying to go with this.
You said you were philo-Semitic, and I can't remember the rest either.
To your point of like like a quick concise recap of what your point was.
I've forgotten. Maybe it's your smoking is affecting me.
um, yeah, I mean everything has its good and negative aspects to it in terms of like Jewish group strategy, how that affects Jews, how it affects other people. To some extent, that's well understood, and largely like without the Adam Green stuff, um, the relationship between management and labor, and like I said, like Jews focus on rules, and your average Gentile, it's just pattern. It's very difficult. You almost have to be an enlightened Gentile to not be anti-Semitic because it's very clear when you look at the elite that the Jews have, especially like in America, like a huge disproportionate amount of representation among the elite. So then if you're looking, oh, maybe the Jews control everything. Like if the Jews are like 20% of the elite, maybe the elite are completely controlled by the Jews, and the non-Jews within the elite are there at the behest or will of the Jews, as opposed to a more realistic view, even according to most Jewish supremacists, is say like no, and that's Jews are obviously overrepresented in the elite. Even if it is 20% of the global elite are made up of Jews, even though Jews are a tiny people, or even the most Jewish supremacist, that's like basically all Jews are elite. Even the most lowly Jew is still higher than the highest Gentile or whatever. But you're still going to have a Gentile elite, and as the Gentile elite, it's basically a mirror representation. And rather than blaming it on the Jews, is saying it's like a mirror image of you, your Gentile representation in the elite. They're not acting that way because Jews are making them act that way. They're acting that way as some sort of general karmatic representation of that what actually you would do if you were in their shoes too. Like if you were in their shoes too, it wouldn't be like the nefariousness of the Jews that causes you to act that way. It would be your own poor decision making and something like that. So it's just an unrealistic conception of what power looks like, how it actually works. And but by saying there is quite a logic to anti-Semitism, especially when things are going bad. When things are going good, there's the same logic to philo-Semitism. But now that things are going bad, you look into like whoever's in charge is messing up. And as far as I could tell, like the Jews certainly have something to do with like what's going wrong or who's in power, who's in charge. Like certainly, like whoever is in charge, it involves the Jews.
Yes, so you could say that the Jews either control America, or that they are the servants of American imperialism. But the point is, it's like, yes, you complain
Or
about the
they're just a
Jews.
minor management class. Like I said, they're just a minor management class that punches above their weight financially. But there's nothing particularly special about the Jews besides the fact that they were quite successful. And in terms of like money, even though the Jews punch way above their weight and can have disproportionate effect in the factors that money affect.
Well, it's your story, right? God's chosen people, maybe specially favored. A lot of people seem to hate the Abrahamic God because they think he's Jewish or Muslim. or they maybe they can't get it out of their head that he's a Jew called Jesus.
Well, so like I said,
In all.
in the hypothetical West of like Detroit, New York, or London, excellence is determined largely by task performance and the rating at the task, and there's a separation for the most part between your professional and your private reputation, unless like okay maybe like in censorship or something crossing the line, you say it's going too far, but largely there's a separation between your public and private reputation, and your public professional reputation is largely determined by job performance, and these
Job
days like there's
performance.
ranking online systems, and in that manner that you could completely separate these type things, like it doesn't even matter if the person's Jewish, like you're saying, like if you're looking for the top doctor, you might you might factor in good considerations, but to some
Hmm.
extent you would likely prefer the person from the ethnic group that you don't like with a good rating to a person from the ethnic group you like with a bad rating. Although, I mean, they might be split, because if you're from that ethnic group, it might be like 50% of people will prefer the person from their own ethnic group with a bad rating, but probably half the people,
Hmm.
and there might be some group differences. Um, but like once
Yeah,
you
it
set
depends on your
yourself
priorities.
but
But
you set yourself free
talking
by
about New
investigating
York.
power. Instead of just hypothesizing, oh, it's controlled by the Jews or that's how they work, you actually go to City Hall and you learn how processes are, you become a lawyer, and it's saying like, okay, yeah, Jews are pretty powerful, but like Jews don't control things. We have a rules-based order, and like you're going to
Mm.
bump into Jews probably like quite a few times. However, the main thing is the rules-based order, and that's why I go, oh well, who created the rules-based order? How do you change the rules-based order? And to some extent, like, okay, the Jews as a collective group have the power to sometimes be able to change the rules-based order, but like relatively it's near impossible for a single person or even a group to even attempt to change the rules-based order.
When you say rules-based order, do you mean the rule of law?
Yeah, I was saying like established law, precedent, legislation, that there's authoritative. Like, I mean, you argue that the Noahide laws, that really this is the courts of justice, and that any Noahide system doesn't have to be like in the West, could be anywhere that has an established court system that is fair and transparent, where there's a body of representative people that have determined what the law is, and the law is transparent and relatively just, and then it's fair, and then it's fairly administered. And
Yeah, yeah. I
so
mean, as I
that that's
understand,
the importance of the rules-based order, to to say, and then okay, well, how closely does the society actually follow the rules as established? But I mean, Jews by nature are relatively functioning at a higher realm of
well,
rules-based
because of all
order.
your restrictions and your do's and don'ts
Yeah, I
at
mean,
all,
to be a
right?
Jew, you have to function like in the rules-based order of what it means to be a Jew. That's very easy for a Jew to think about, the rules-based order that Gentiles should have to live according to. And so if you're like a little Jewish kid, you probably like sit around thinking about the rules-based order that like Gentiles should live according to. And then you end up in
Or how
professions like,
to make the rules work for you, which is how I understand it. I mean, as far as I understand it, the rule of law is, people wanting to obey the law just because it's a law, because they trust in it and see that it's in their interest to obey the law. Um,
well, I mean,
you know,
rules-based orders really only affect financial transactions. So like it's only the elite that generally care about rules-based order, because it's important for them to correctly know about and make um, financial transactions. But if you have the system of like how you can own property, how you can run a business, and all of these various rules, so your average person, saying that's where you come into the professions, the accounting, the lawyer, the mortgage broker, the life insurance broker, sometimes the doctor, or any of these various like professions where they just explain like this is how you do it, and like why is this the way you do it, because the law says so. And like even though you may not have known that like bad things could happen to you if you don't follow this law, And so the rules-based order is upheld by professions like law and
Hmm.
accounting. So when you first open up a business and you have to pay taxes, and you're like, oh man, I have to pay that. And then eventually you get audited, and then eventually you pay an accountant who just understands and you trust them, or you start to study the law itself. What's the basis? How do you minimize your taxes? So you have to actually pull out the law books and study it yourself, or you say really oh, this is nonsensical, we should change it. Then you have to avow yourself to the near impossible process of trying to change the rules-based system. And I think the more you try to change the rules-based system, the more likely you're going to have run-ins with Jews. Because if you're just a regular Gentile, you may have never had a run-in with Jews, but if you hang
Mm.
out at City Hall, you're probably used to talking to Jews all the time.
Yes. So you mentioned New York, and of course we'll be thinking of Mamdani. And if he gets in, I suppose Jews will get the blame, won't they?
No, I'm saying
If Mamdani
Mandami.
becomes mayor of New York, do you support him?
Well, I was joking with a old friend of mine that's considered moving out to my area. That yeah, I'd probably be popular in New York now. And but no, I would say Mandami's socialism, Bernie Sanders type agenda is actually in the best interest of the majority of Jews, because half of Jews in New York City are, I mean, I don't call poverty, but in financial troubles, and the biggest thing affecting them is high cost and these various things, and you could argue that his socialist agenda will benefit most Jews, and it's more the people concerned about foreign policy, like Mandami said, it doesn't matter his. He didn't put it like that. Maybe he would have been better off, but it doesn't matter his views on Israel. His job is running the city of New York, and so he will have a lot of Jewish support in the terms of welfare programs, because an inordinate amount of Jews, especially Hasidim, are on welfare programs. And even though, even the Satmar, the big Hasidic groups that might have a black vote, so you might actually have an agreement between the Hasidim that are neutral, not necessarily anti-Zionist, but tend towards neutral. But the nature of the welfare state is so important that you could straight up have an agreement with some pushing for welfare provisions that will benefit the Hasidic community, and they will agree en masse of tens of thousands of people to vote for him, regardless of his anti-Semitism or views on Israel, because the wealth is really one of the most important things affecting the larger Hasidic community.
Hmm. So
I wouldn't be
it's
surprised if
basically
it's
the
like that in
poor
London also.
Jews not caring about the formerly rich Jews with all these apartment buildings whose
Well, you have
tenants
to be
might
rich to
not
care
pay
about
rent.
Israel. You have to be rich to care enough to try to influence local New York politics based on Israeli politics. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, there's a lot of rich and powerful Jews, and to them, they're just completely unacceptable. What he said about Israel is completely unacceptable. We have to do everything possible to make sure he doesn't come into power. But that's a privilege of wealth and status that allows you to use that to try to influence politics. But your average Hasidic Jew that is struggling financially with the huge inflation and cost of living, I would not. I expect Mandami's probably going to win by a blowout, and you're probably going to see a lot of Hasidim vote for Mandami, because of economic, and if you're it really, okay, where I'm living, it's much sparser and there's work available. But realistically, if you're in New York and you're just advocating for your own best interest, just like London, probably you're going to vote for the creation and continuation of ever increasing welfare state. And so New York is already in that state where the cost of living far exceeds the ability of a working class poor person to live there. And they could only do that through the subsidiary of the government and the welfare state. And because the welfare state has grown so large that the electorate basically has to cater to the welfare state because they already make up the majority of the electorate. And so like London and New York City may both be in that situation. And so yes, in that case, like hundreds, tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of Jews will vote for Mandami because they're poor.
Very
And like,
interesting.
I don't know if you agree with that assessment.
Well, it sounds very plausible, and I know Rabbi David Bar-Hayim was very concerned about Mamdani getting in, but he's very anti-Muslim. So yes. Do you listen to him from time to time? Do you know who I'm talking about?
No, not at all. I just haven't had enough time to keep up with personalities, or I'm involved in stuff more locally. It's too much to investigate online personalities.
Well, I'm still, vaguely interested in Judaism and how Jews navigate morality and politics in these difficult times. Do you want to say a few last words about the Khaled and E. Michael Jones stream? If you can remember anything about it that other than E. Michael Jones saying Muslims were, sent as a scourge by God to punish sinners.
Well, the reason
there
I'm
were a
streaming
few
with
complicated ideas. Sorry?
I like Khalid, but can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, I can.
Claire?
Yes, I can hear you.
I think E. Michael Jones is streaming with Khalid largely the same reason I am. I like Khalid relatively, but the main reason I wanted to stream with him is to have dialogue to stop the war in Israel, to talk to a Muslim in Jordan, or Connection, or at least Israeli friendly, or someone. But I saw the importance of the situation and need to have dialogue in order to
You're
stop the
roboting.
tragedy. And I think
I think you need to say what you just said again, because I couldn't hear you.
Test.
Yes.
Claire?
Yes, I can hear you.
Saying that the situation demands dialogue and war, so I thought it was extremely important to have dialogue with Khalid just to stop the bloodshed. And I think E. Michael Jones at this point feels the same way, that he said so, that, and I agree with him 100%. And I've been doing it for a while, but maybe you'll see an increase in this dialogue. And basically, if you don't have dialogue, you're going to have war. We already have war, and it's a disastrous situation. But at the same time, it's already reached levels where it's very difficult to have good faith dialogue, and that's made me more resigned to functioning locally, to being less productive, to talking to people online. It's more likely to just lead to useless conflict. And so I've been trying to build my coalitions and connections or value locally.
Yes, that makes sense.
Maybe at one point I had even spoken to half of the major streamers at Speaker's Corner, and people thought I was the Speaker's Corner guy, because I was on 10 different people, regulars at Speaker's Corner, but those days have lost. I haven't spoken to any of those people for over a year.
So which ones have you spoken to? What Joseph Cohen? He seems to have gone quiet. I don't see him there anymore, but I don't go there that often.
Yeah, I think Khalid was at Joseph, Zobita. Most of them were through Zobita, and I was forgetting his name. What was the half Indian German Zionist guy?
I'm not sure who you mean. He's German, is he? Half Indian.
No, the half German Indian, half German guy that used to stream.
Ralph Masilamai?
Yeah, Ralph.
Yeah.
Ralph,
He seems to have disappeared.
yeah, and but I mean, I was on like Ralph and Zobita's streams for like probably like over 100 hours, like on both of them, and they were like loaded with people who actually knew him from Speaker's Corner. So like there was a period of time where I was on streams with people from Speaker's Corner so many times, like people thought I was a regular there, even though I'm in Detroit. I was even on like some Black Israelites and African, like for like when I was active a few years ago, like when I was on Ralph all the time, I made my rounds and I was on like small channels. I was even on a few like, I mean, not like the major like, but I'm saying like you, it takes a lot of effort. Like you had to put hours into doing it daily and keeping up with all these people and researching and listening to content. And I almost completely dropped out of it. The only like, unless someone openly like asked and invite me, that's basically the only streaming I'm going to do. Although randomly, Church of Entropy said she might be on Modern Day Debate again, and like I said, I'd do a post show with her.
Do you think she was stoned when she was on Modern Day Debate? She looked very stoned.
I think, I think she was. Or I mean, she might have been, but I mean, I think she just figured like a strategy might. I mean, like I definitely thought like she didn't want to be talking slow. Like talking slow, like doesn't make you look good in content in any way. But like just deferring and not doing much talking, might actually be good in keeping her in the roster, because like really that's what Modern Day Debate wants, and saying they need like, and she's getting older. Like I looked, I was like, oh man, like she's older and not, God forbid, not as attractive anymore in the sense of like Modern Day Debate. But like like her feminine privilege, she's still in the roster, even though they became more strict and it's more and there's more requirements to be in the roster. Like they still need like women, and so and they kind of grandfathered in the people that were previously there. So I mean, it's like kind of ironic that like she's up there with like famous like like OnlyFans debate me bro girls, but like somehow she's been grandfathered into the Modern Day Debate roster, and probably her strategy of just largely remaining quiet is a good strategy. As where you, if
Yes,
you
because
got
I
into
remember that she was
the
asked
roster,
questions. Says, "Oh, I don't know. Talk to my
yeah, like you
partner."
would be like more likely to say something that would get you booted from the roster, as where like if you and just sit there and look submissive, and she got invited back.
And smile pleasantly. Yes. Oh, so she's going to be back on again. I think
I don't know the
since
date.
she,
She even said
yeah.
tomorrow, but I mean, I know what they're doing because they have their big IRL event coming up
Mm-hmm.
in like 2 weeks. So they make a whole bunch of shows in order to sell tickets and promote their event. So but like at this point they don't have, like they're caught up with the celebrities. So what
Mm-hmm.
they want to do is use their bigger status now to recruit bigger names. So they don't really allow smaller people to get into the roster anymore. But if you were
Mm-hmm.
one of their popular, like small time streamers who was in the roster before they made that change, you're still in the roster. So that's like Church of Entropy, who still in the roster and gets called up,
Mm-hmm.
even though she's a small time streamer. But like they would definitely like bounce or kick her for a bigger streamer, because like that's what they're after. They want to leverage their success to get bigger names, as opposed to giving opportunity to smaller streamers. And it's like,
Yes.
I mean, it's somewhat capitalism that forces it to be that way, because it's like, oh man, I could really only do this if I'm making a living off of it, and this is the only way to make a living off of it. So like basically I have to do it this way if I want to do it. And that's somewhat like the rules based order, because it's like I just want to be successful operating within the rules based order, and then you say,
Mm-hmm.
well, okay, these are the rules, this is how I'll operate. And next thing you know, like Modern Day Debates can, like selling out.
Mm-hmm. So do you know the topic that she's going to be debating?
I think it was another relationships panel, which is really the shift to what's profitable, because relationship panels are actually one of the most popular genres of YouTube right now, like having men and women on arguing about relationships. So Modern Day Debate is probably loosely trying to slip into that genre, of having relationship panels guised as debates. That'd be my guess or my read of it, and it's basically going after what the audience wants, and kind of like Andrew Wilson, Destiny, because to some extent, um, modern day debate is still dependent on the Destiny audience. Like Destiny is still the biggest regular streamer who promotes their events, and um, the majority capture probably of people who watch them, and so that's the economic model. Like Destiny is the only streamer that really has proven a long term economic model, and that you have to kind of go with like the only fangirls. So they're saying like the rules based order, because like you have to go with it, somewhat meritocratic in the sense you have to give people what they want, and once the law allows people to get what they want, then society restructures. So it's just like, okay, once pornography is legal, then the next step is it becomes destigmatized, and then you have society where it's just natural and mainstream. It's part of society, and the negative effects and ills of that are apparent to everybody. But so E. Michael Jones or the counter Semites largely focus on the rules based order. Even like Kevin McDonald, and saying like no, it was Jews, and this is how they did it by passing the Hart-Celler Act. Like the reason why society is the way it is because um, Jews leveraged their power in America to have the Hart-Celler Act passed. And once the Hart-Celler Act was passed, everything else largely has fallen into place since then. Because like what the rule of the game was changed, and once the rule of the game was changed, this was the net, the logical conclusion of that.
But um, the Johnson Reed Act was, in a way, a form of liberalizing, right? I mean, the Johnson Reed Act in 1924 was about we're not going to be so mean about white people from certain parts of Europe. But we're going to be nicer to them. We're going to be nicer to Catholics, and the theory is that that was the thin end of the wedge when even white Christian identity was being diluted, and that was when the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant gave away his supremacy.
Did you follow all this major chess saga with like the guy who likely committed suicide and like the Russian grandmasters accusing him of cheating?
No, I haven't. Do tell.
I mean, somewhat. I mean, God forbid, like one of the top chess players in America, who's a Russian immigrant, or his parents were, likely committed suicide at the age of 29. No one really knows why, although he was clearly mentally unstable. But like he was famous, he was one of the most famous chess players. He was a millionaire. He was well liked. Um, However, the former Russian world champion Vladimir Kramnik was accusing him of cheating. And even though in the American audiences that no one really considered the cheating allegations that seriously, from the Russian audience, it was and so people are claiming that the reason he killed himself is because this guy Kramnik went on these unwarranted, unclaimed smear campaign accusing him of cheating, which generally I don't buy. I think he was probably an unstable genius who you committed suicide for a variety of reasons, and I can't imagine like the cheating accusations were that. Although he did make statements, but it's kind of like a mystery because it's like he just died, and it's
Mhm.
shocking. Like he was kind of like a nice guy who was at the peak of his success, besides the minor cheating accusations. Um,
How did he die? How did he kill himself?
it's also unclear, but the police said it's like suicide or drug overdose, and so it's
All
unclear
right.
if he was a drug user or if maybe they're sleeping pills. And his family has said they don't plan on releasing um, releasing the autopsy or cause of death report to the public. So the presumption is
Mhm.
the family, has asked for privacy, so there's a higher presumption of suicide, and the police have officially said that there's no sign of foul play. There's no criminal investigation. It's it's the so it's the police have ruled it either a suicide or drug overdose, and if they did an autopsy, it won't be released to the public. And so with that, there's kind of a frenzy from the public that somehow Kramnik killed him, which could be from murder conspiracies to just like it was his baseless harassment, that bullying that caused him to commit suicide or caused him to have a mental breakdown. But
how can one cheat at chess?
Through computer assistance, because the computers are so good now that the computers could beat the top players. So with computer assistance, you could beat even even the world champions, even the top players. And so online, people play mostly online. It's near impossible to tell who's cheating, who's not cheating. You got accusations all over the place. I mean, it's kind of like petty and diminutive, but it's been so chess is like in the news, like all it's major news stories, international, and it's already dying down. It was already like half a week ago, and it's already largely died down.
Mm-hmm.
You still streaming often? Like I popped on Luke Ford once or twice in the last few months, and I think you were actually on the same show as me, maybe even once or
on
twice.
Sunday, yes, and you were disagreeing with him about. Now I'm trying to remember what it was about now. Bachelors?
He was talking. No, he was talking about the decline of like, I forget the term, but it was something related to like the decline of like elites or masculine in the West, and I said it's violence. Is that what has changed is violence becoming of leadership. That it used to be being physical and violent was a qualification for leadership, and in the modernized Western feminist world, being violent, and then we were talking about honor culture, and he was just kind of like talking like nonsensical of, I mean, I say like denying facts. Like he'd say, I prefer it this way, but like he didn't even seem to understand like what honor culture is, or like to recognize that there was a phenomenon even in British history where like a gentleman had to accept a duel, and even just the sentiment that your honor is more important than anything else. Like the harikari, like randomly he said like some Japanese nonsense. I was like, what the hell are you talking about? Like the Japanese most exemplify the honor culture, where it's better to die than live without honor, where they even have like like it's harikiri or something like that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, so I mean, I popped on, and then like I yelled at him about Israel and Zionism and war crimes. But I just wanted someone to talk to, and he was talking about that subject, so I thought I'd chime in. I think it was beneficial to Luke because, like, a lot of times, like even Church of Entropy, because like I have studied this, and I think the evidence is clear that in terms of like sexual prowess or what arouses women, it is violence. And then I think I blew Luke's mind because like he knows I'm right, but he even, and we've discussed it 3 or 4 times. But like I was mentioning that like basically like promiscuous women, what they want is a man to dominate their other boyfriends. They want an alpha, and the main quality they want in the alpha is going to have to be physical domination to keep in line. Because like if you're going to have multiple physical relationships with multiple men, um, most of those men are going to be stronger than the women, and there's always going to be an extreme risk that the man will take out his jealousy on the woman who he could likely overpower. So the woman needs the lower level men that she's also promiscuous with for various reasons to be in fear of retribution of physical violence from the alpha, as she herself can't defend herself against and so I mean that's just kind of like animalistic logic in that. And I mean I don't think I think most people, like especially in Hollywood, or people, they don't recognize the brutal truth of human nature, and then and even American society, where it's saying like everybody's lost their honor. You're required to sell out for money, and
Well,
so
we
is
were
it.
talking about falling for the bad boy, right? The bully, the jerk, because I think
Well,
being a
no, so
bully means that you're kind
women's
of
sexual.
dominant.
Well, I mean, you're giving a narrative, but I'm saying the underlying fact is that women sexually select for violence. It's kind of it's a subconscious animalistic thing that even the most elite, animalistically, women select for violence. So the bully or these other people, really what they're displaying that attracts the woman is violence.
Or
Because like
difference. I
women
mean,
select,
the English
doesn't
talk
make the
about,
most logical sense. What's the most important behavior that a woman wants to select for in her man, and it's going to be physical dominance over other men.
yes, being more capable of protecting her from other men,
Yeah,
which
that's
is why
usually.
I guess women find men shorter than them repellent,
Yeah,
even though.
don't like that's actually best demonstrated through violence. And so that the women like women I mean it's against, you might not like the fact that that's your nature, but you're a better woman if you recognize that violence sexually arouses women.
Yes, I mean there are women who want to marry mass murderers in prison, don't they? Or they write
Well,
fan
it's not,
mail
there
to these
are,
people.
it's I'm saying it's a biological fact about women. It's not a psychological deficiency. It's the animalistic nature that man and women are essentially animals, and these animalistic elements around mating um, are a fact of the feminine psyche that enlightened women know they have to wrestle against. I mean, so that's like you have to recognize your animalistic nature to conquer it. And so, but just saying that uh, rejection of fact and reality, that the connect whatever it's violence. And just saying there's a fear, like people are scared to talk about violence because you think if we talk about violence it's more likely to happen, and it's somewhat like superstitious because like in reality it's the opposite, that the best way for violence not to happen is to actually talk about it. But superstitiously, like people are scared, like, oh, if I talk about violence I'm probably going to get beat up. And I was mentioning because like I've been coaching chess, and I got a lot of like junior chess prodigies. And I was just mentioning like I was talking like Luke Ford, and it made for good discussion because like I have talked my way of getting out of getting beat up hundreds and hundreds of times in my life. It's almost like a phenomenon where I would go to people I knew who wanted to beat me up because I had confidence that I would be able to talk my way out of it.
And
And
did
like
you?
I'm assuming like you, who became like a lawyer for like white nationalists, are also quite good at getting your way talking your way out of getting beat up.
Well, I like to think that I wasn't, I haven't put myself in that kind of danger, um, because, well, I suppose there were a few meetings that were disrupted, but it was by, um, anti BNP people who were, making, who were being aggressive. Um,
I mean, put it
but
if you put it straight into logistics. Like if you're in a group of like 5 people, one of them's probably not going to like you, and especially if you're in a hostel, like if you're in a place that like okay, there's reason like you're different ethnicity, or it's a group where there's especially like explicit reason why some of them not want you there. But just statistically, as the group is big enough, some people there are not going to like you and will make a point of trying to turn people against you. So in
mhm.
most group settings, you'd be like, yeah, these like kind of people don't really want me there, and they've been working against me, trying to turn the crowd against me. But I have successfully been able to thwart all of their attempts up to now, and I think in the future going forward, I will also be able to thwart their attempts. So I would even go into a hostile environment where I knew these people were against me and going to try to turn the crowd against me because I had confidence in my ability to talk the situation in my favor. And so I was just thinking of that because like I got these chess students are the kind of like scrawny dorks that have big mouths, and like thinking like I was a scrawny dork that had a big mouth, but like I
Mm.
rarely got beat up because like I was pretty good at like and like there were a lot of times where there was a guy who was like about to beat me up, and then like I was able to talk my way out of it. And just to accept that like yeah, that's the reality. Like you upset people, and like the natural reaction to being upset is violence. And if people don't act according to, I mean, you could also, it doesn't have to be like, you could just make them scared, like, like you'll get caught. Like I know you want to, but you won't. You know what's going to happen to you. Or to kind of like, oh, I'm a useful guy. Like you'd rather have me on your side than against you. Or like,
Mhm.
I could be useful to you. Like, I'll let you copy my homework. Or,
Was that how you managed to do it?
Well, yeah, I mean, when I was in school, like basically, I usually like let like a big guy copy my homework to protect me. I mean, that was my base. I mean, like that's the most basic geek strategy in like elementary and middle school, or even high
Mhm.
school. Like, but yeah, that was my most common strategy was to, and like sometimes it was money, like just like using my lunch money to buy a few. But I mean, like the most common strategies, like letting people copy your homework till eventually money, and money is always the dominant strategy. But you could just
Mhm.
intuitively figure that out as, I mean, I was just seeing myself in little kids now because like saying like because and even till today that but I was saying that people get scared talking about violence because like I said, most people are superstitious and they think like, oh man, if I talk about violence, it's probably more likely violence is going to happen. But there's the other school that's like, no, violence is like a natural inclination of just emotions and human conflict. And the only way to prevent violence is to talk about people's natural inclination or desire for violence. Kind of like, oh, you're pretty upset. Did you think about hitting him? And something like to actually have that conversation would actually make it less likely that the violence would occur than to not talk about it. So I mean that's a modern debate in psychology, but I'm more from the school of taught. And so I think just that hit Luke straight up with that, it even like evoked childhood memories. And like like because Luke, whatever his psychological condition, there's nothing that he likes more than telling stories about himself. So in that sense, he even messaged me later, it's like great show, because and like I'm streaming with Luke for years, I know like generally there's nothing he likes more. Like you could tell like you got Luke in a positive way when it evokes him telling like childhood stories about himself.
And they're usually about how well that he was unhappy or
Luke likes a good
excluded
psychiatrist.
or
Luke
bullied.
likes psychiatrists, so like if you get him, like he'll acknowledge you, like good one. So I'm like, if you get Luke and like psychoanalyze him, and then he looks at it like, oh man, you're probably right. And then like even Luke, he's like, you're right. I remember this girl who didn't like me, and like and she like ended up dating the guy who beat me up. And like so I even demonstrated to like from his own memory, he was like, oh man, David, you are right, and my own childhood memory actually supports your conclusion. Like yes, I do remember being a weakling with a kid with a big mouth, and I do remember liking a girl who rejected me, who ended up dating the guy who beat me up.
Mm.
But I'm saying
Mm.
that's just natural animalistic human nature, that they should be like, of course that's how it happens, like that's the rule of the playground. Like whatever you thought in your head, that was just fantasy.
Yes,
And
I suppose for men the possibility of violence is always greater than for women, I guess, unless they are
like
um,
women,
particularly reckless.
no, man, the opposite. Like men often don't select for violence at all, and often women, violence is a sign of less success for childbirth. Like women who do athletics or various things often are, I mean not often, like are and basically guaranteed are going to have the ability to have less children. So it's women who select for violence, and men would select against violence. Men would want um, I mean, the pure evolutionary argument would be selecting for women that are going to show the possibility of raising like good multiple healthy children. However, violence is generally not one of those, because like generally like women who are athletic, like I mean like Haredi women, Muslim women who never do athletics, never do sports, and have like 10 kids. But like generally like once women go, or I mean Khalid didn't, I was mentioning that one, like the correlation of like education, and it's not feminism, like education. Like once women are educated, they don't want to have as many children. But also like once women start like exercising and playing sports, they can't even have as many children physically. Like it causes physical changes in the woman's body that like if she does in teenage years, like athletics or things like that, like, I'd have to do the research to the exact studies. I'm not sure if you know what I'm talking about,
Well,
but
it
like
sounds about right that athletic women don't have, I don't know, that the hips aren't as broad or something, they don't have childbearing hips or something like that.
well,
Because they tend to be what skinny and,
men wouldn't find violent women attractive. I mean, you might have.
No. Men prefer, women sweet-natured, loyal, meek, and mild. I guess.
Yeah, I'm saying it's exactly the opposite. Women select for violent men. Men don't select for violent women. I mean, you might have like violent men who've had a dating history and like okay, I'm going to be better off with a violent woman, but like as a natural evolutionary thing, women select for violent men, and men don't select for more purity, and that's evolutionary. That's not like psychologically or culturally. That's because humans are animals, and that's common across all animals,
Mm-hmm.
or not all animals, but all animals that have the breeding practices of, like the category. Because I guess like some, cats or different things have completely different breeding patterns.
Mm. Mm.
And then you put the Jew in because like Jews generally, like I said, like Jews create rules based orders for Gentiles to carry out. Because like historically, like saying like Jews realized until the modern era, which is like kind of already the Messianic era, Jews just realized they were never going to actually have power. That the Gentiles would never follow a Jew like that. It's like Jesus Christ, the only Jew a Gentile would follow was a dead Jew. Even like Dara Horn, their people love dead Jews type thing. But just in the Jewish um, ethos of living in diaspora for the period of time, Jews didn't have any legitimate even vision that it was possible for them to have power till the modern era. So it was completely, Jewish strategy was completely based on convincing the Gentile elites to create and enforce a certain rules based order. So the even modern day Jews, but I'm saying for like 1,500 years of diaspora, that's how Jews function, which is like kind of
But
the.
don't you think the Gentile would already have worked it out for himself that, if he has a vast empire, he would need a legal system to, make things run properly?
Well, yeah, I'm not saying like the European kings weren't like, dumbasses that were just like Jews, please write a rules based system for us. But I'm saying Jews always had leverage and power to be near the centers of power to influence. And you also have historically the main leverage that historically Jews have used to influence the rules based order, which is money, which okay, says bribery or different forms of legality. But I mean, historically, Jews have always punched ahead above their weight in terms of money, and that's the main historic tool that would have been leveraged to, change the rules based order. And like so in Europe, like most Jews weren't ambitious. They weren't trying to be like, let me make the rules for all Gentiles to live according to. They just wanted to make the rules that the Jewish community lived according to. But that includes like the agreement in the Fourth Lateran Council in the usury laws, because the Jewish leaders negotiated the Fourth Lateran Council and the usury laws with the church. It wasn't imposed upon the Jews by the church. It was negotiated by the leading rabbinic figures and the church together, even though Jews often like to say like, oh, we are only banking because like they forced us to and we could only do it. Like no, like our sages actually negotiated that deal with the church that made the Fourth Lateran Council, right?
What you mean the Lateran Treaty of 1929?
No, I mean the first
With
usury laws was like,
Mussolini or something else?
no, it's in like the 10th or 11th century, the usury laws that limited Jews to lending on interest.
Oh, right. But
I'm
because I suppose the Gentiles thought, if they kept it at one remove, like if we invite the Jews in and we borrow money from them, and
it was
when we get tired of
negotiated.
paying the
It was
interest, we kick them out.
negotiated with the leaders of the Jewish community. It wasn't imposed upon the Jewish community. It was negotiated together with the Jewish community. And I'm
Okay.
saying that's an example of, because like Jews did not have the power in Europe to affect. I mean, to that extent, maybe they did, but I mean, Jews had leverage to affect the rules that affected them, like ghetto laws or the various laws, the systems that Jews lived under special rules or provisions, because historically you didn't have like equal rights for everybody. Jews had a certain subject status, and they had to have certain rules created to benefit them, or provisions or protections, or at least the leaders of the Jewish community were always trying to get more provisions and protections for the Jewish community. And then even in bad situations where there was large anti-Semitism, still the leaders of the Catholic Church or the nobility would still often come together with the Jewish leaders to try to, negotiate some sort of settlement that would squash the situation. So just saying this, that it wasn't, it wasn't like, the church just got together and said, we're going to impose this on the Jews. Like saying the church leaders met with the leading rabbis or Jewish communal leaders and negotiated these decisions. And that's, because Jews generally naturally function according to these rules-based orders. Because it makes sense to Jews in that, like, as a Jewish strategy or Jewish religion, cultural, that like, okay, society functions according to rules. We're a minority, and so we have to leverage our power to push for the society to make rules in a certain way, like at least that keep our safety or benefit us to, even points of benefiting us at the expense. Because if you actually, like, Duvid was actually a librarian at one of the biggest Hebrew synagogues in Brooklyn, like library. Like I was a librarian at a synagogue with like thousands and thousands of Hebrew books that dated back over thousands of years. And one of the categories of books that Jews wrote over the last few thousand years is like responses, like legal responses, where someone asks the question and then the rabbi gives an answer. And like almost every rabbi has books and books of their collected letters and responses. Even rabbis from like 1,000 years ago have like volumes of books collected together of this. And just to mention, and there's also a collection like how should we deal in like Gentile negotiations and interest. And it's like one of the common questions that people ask rabbis was like about how to negotiate the interest rates. Like, saying literally, like, in the Jewish history, like the annals of the Jewish history, letters of rabbis to their congregants and non-Jewish leaders. It wasn't the only topic. It wasn't, even like, it maybe only been like 5-10% of them, but it's a major topic in rabbinic response of the time is negotiating interest rates. So, it wasn't just like it was imposed upon, and even like some of the Jewish migrations were specifically over interest rates, where like the Jewish community decided to pick up and leave because they set the interest rates too low, that they didn't feel it was going to be worth, or whatever reason the Jewish community decided that they had to pick up and leave because of the negotiation over interest rates. So it's not like like the E. Michael Jones perspective, like it's not like Joseph Cohn where it's just like randomly like being banking was imposed on the Jews against our will by Catholics. And it really just shows lack of Jewish scholarship, because the Jews, like I was a librarian at a major synagogue in Brooklyn that had thousands and thousands of these books, and we actually have a record of the Jewish side of these negotiations. Like those exist. We know the names of the rabbis, and we even have usually their letters and version of events or discussions with communal leaders of their perspective of these negotiations, often surrounding interest rates.
But what about the Jubilee? I guess the Jews ignored their own rules about having a Jubilee every 50 or 70 years.
Pejorative. I'm saying the Jews didn't ignore their own rules. I'm saying whatever the consensus of the sages of that generation made a ruling, and from that period it hasn't occurred. So I'm just saying, like, people who follow Jewish law follow the rabbis of their generation. So just because the Jubilee is mentioned in the Torah, like, the history of when it stopped being practiced, why it's not practiced, or to some extent parts of it are still practiced. But that's just a pejorative, I don't know, anti-Semitic way to phrase it. The Jews didn't purposely disobey their own rules. Like, Jews followed the sages of the generation, and occasionally in exceptional circumstances, the sages of the generation have ruled that a certain practice is no longer followed. Just like polygamy.
Was there a limit to polygamy? Well, like a maximum of 4 for Muslims?
Well, I mentioned the polygamy because the same rabbi that negotiated the Fourth Lateran Council, Rabbeinu Gershon, is the rabbi who banned polygamy in Ashkenaz for Ashkenazi Jews. But this Rabbeinu Gershon that's very famous. You could look up the polygamy ban. He's also the rabbi who negotiated the usury laws with the Catholic Church. Although that's usually lesser known and said. and so it's ironic because like Jewish scholars, like we have these books and like you could even look up the letters and know this stuff, but like people like Joseph Cohn don't even know this stuff exists. And he's like, that's anti-Semitism, and it just. But I mean, so that's like E. Michael Jones is a legitimate scholar. Like his book, like I mean, I don't. He hasn't. I mean, he knows a lot about Judaism too, but I'm saying like those documents still exist. A lot of this stuff, and this connection of a Jewish strategy it relates like and I'm putting it like you could interpret largely positively like in the terms of Jews somewhat naturally abide by rules-based orders and that's a good thing. However, that could be nefarious in terms of using it to social engineer for your advantage. It's like what put up very high. Look like the main danger people face is violence, um, but the danger you face from like highly intelligent people that are collectively working together with lots of resources is them implementing a rules-based system upon you that favors them or is against your own interests. And to some extent, that's at the heart of a lot of Jewish conspiracies or anti-Semitism. But at this end, it's also some truth to it because like look at the Hart-Zeller Act or any of these various things that clearly had a Jewish group strategy perspective as part of how they happened. I assume I mean, we've been talking. I assume you largely agree with all of that because.
Well, I don't know anything of it, so I'm just there's somebody in the chat contradicting you. So while you speak, I've just been highlighting his comments. I must say I I have no knowledge of these things, so
You're a lawyer. Are you saying like, I mean, like?
Well, I do. I didn't learn anything about usury, since it is widely practiced.
Yeah, but I'm assuming in terms of understanding the nature of rules-based systems and saying like lawyers are from the elite because like your average person they don't even know the rules they live by, how the rules are made, and like largely they only come across the rules as it's pertinent to them. So like people like the driving laws or basic things like do not kill, you can't steal, but like usually you only come across the laws and the rules as it's directly relevant in your life. So like most laws like business or immigration or any of these things your average person may never come across it or care about it their whole life. But and the legal philosophy to even understand what the hell does a rules-based order system mean? What does it even mean that there's a law or there's like a body of people that made this rule and now it's going to be enforced and everyone has to live by it, so on and so on. You had to become a lawyer for that. And you still might not even understand it that well, or have like okay, you're involved in politics and you're UKIP, and that's largely a result of your own personal effort to become a barrister and understand these things.
Well, I mean, in terms of the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution. Obviously, I didn't learn that when I was at law school, but I think that there is this idea that the unalienable rights of man come from God, according to the Declaration of Independence. While the British do not even have a constitution, they call it an unwritten constitution, which means that, well, really they haven't got one at all. And I don't think a lot of lawyers really understand that. It's been this contract played on generations of lawyers. So that they will generally think, oh yes, we have an unwritten constitution, but in fact, the rights of any British citizen could be destroyed the next day by Parliament, because Parliament operates under the doctrine of parliamentary supremacy, which means it can pass or repeal any law for any reason without referring to anyone at all.
Well, I told Khalid, I mean, one of the first time we streamed, I said he agreed, and probably part of the reason we're still streaming. It's a quote from Ethics of the Father, the Talmud, where I mean, you want to love. The secret to a successful life is loving work, and
Mm-hmm.
and there's another statement where the only way to be free is to subject yourself to the law. So like, the fallacy, like, oh, I just want to be free and, have no obligations. That's a fantasy. It doesn't exist. The only way to be free is to meet your obligations and, saying that you could only be free within the law. You can't actually be free from the law. It's only when you're within the law that you have freedom. And
Yes, freedom from being thrown in jail and, people knocking at your door asking for their money, because
well, I mean, you're raised. It's
otherwise it's a law of the jungle, right?
well, I
If
mean,
you
it's what
think,
the army.
oh, I can kill anyone I like, well, somebody more powerful than you can kill you and take your stuff.
Yeah, we're raised into darkness and ignorance. Ignorance is the natural condition. You have to subject yourself to a process, and the first process is getting yourself in line with the rules-based order. In the beginning, like, what are these rules? Who made these rules? Why do I have to follow them? To, eventually, just think, okay, whatever. These are the rules, and I'm going to get in line with them. And then, okay, it's the people who make the rules, were they unjust and the rules are rigged against you? And like, even if they were, is it still best to get in line? To, kind of a genesis. Now you're a lawyer. Now you're the one who's, you understand the rules, you follow the rules, and you're part of making and writing the rules, and like how to do things, operate within the rules and benefit. You're a businessman. You're moving up the management chain. But like Jews as a management class, with a religion that has this high focus on, these rules-based order, that just naturalized into Judaism this rules-based order thinking that is largely beneficial. It's only at the heart of some conspiracy theories, or say some conspiracy anti-Semitic theories are true, but the ultimate cause is actually, I'd say, a positivity of the Jews in this rules-based order that could be corrupted. I just mentioned it because you're a barrister, and
Well,
most
yes,
people.
because I think Jews represent the rule of law because they were the first people who was given the Torah, which is written scripture. You can't have law without writing, because otherwise it would just depend on the mood of the leader about how he's going to decide your case. And, you know, maybe it's just, his mood. So today he's angry, he will punish you, and tomorrow he'll be in a good mood, and the same set of facts might not make him um, decide in the same way. And that's why you need, words, so you can focus your attention on what does this word mean. Did this person really commit the crime? Are there exceptions and excuses, etc.? But I think fundamentally the whole point of the law, is that God, if he exists, made laws for us in order to protect us from each other. That I presume is the real reason, that a benign God said, you need safety rails. You won't know how to behave towards each other unless I give you these rules, and you are to love your neighbor as yourself. And if you really did do that, then you'll be free of conflict, division, etc.
You might have better success with Jews or rabbis in your ranking thing if you actually use the expression, instead of ranking Islam, Christianity, and to say rank the Islamic rules-based system or legal system, because like, it's vague, and then you're saying, well, as a rules-based system, all of them fall short, but like relatively, maybe Islam falls less short than
Mm.
Christianity, but Islam itself like still falls short of a Noahide um perfect. um
Yes, because there's no there are no blasphemy laws in the Quran. It doesn't even mention blasphemy, and I suppose according to the Noahide laws, um, Sharia is not strict enough.
well, but I'm saying
The prohibition
rules
against idolatry
basic,
and blasphemy is not in the Sharia.
but it qualifies as a Noahidic rules-based system in the sense that it's relatively clearly written, and it can be transparently fairly enforced. Obviously there could be corruption, but you saying if you're in an Islamic society, the rules are relatively clearly written, and
Mhm.
in a Noahide compliant Islamic society, if they transparently and fairly carried those rules, relatively the Islamic compliant of
Of
uh,
all the
a
religions.
Christian society that because the Christian society, I mean, let's say Catholic society that has its canon law that's semi clearly written, and if it was fairly and transparently enforced, that obviously certainly the idolatry, um, but minus the idolatry, then it may not be that Islam is more compliant than Christianity. But like certainly, if you're going to include the idolatry, that Christianity is definitely going to be less Noahide compliant.
Well, I mean, the first and second commandments are repeated in the first and second Noahide laws, and I think the view is that if you really take seriously the first and second commandments, and then you will avoid all the other sins. But if you don't avoid idolatry and blasphemy, you will actually be more likely to commit the other sins.
I mean, there's some perspective from a Jewish perspective, at least, like the truth is what's best for the Jews. Although, like I said, most of the Jews you've spoken to don't agree with it, that idolatry is between man and God. So, from a Judaic perspective, you're better off, or you could eliminate the idolatry from consideration. So, like I said, um, you're better off working with, say, a pagan person that doesn't steal, or than a Muslim person who steals, because idolatry is between man and God, as where the other Noahide rules are between man and his fellow man. So it doesn't really affect you if a person is idolatrous, as where it affects you if another person is not compliant with one of the other Noahide laws, or maybe the dietary, you could argue also.
Yes, I would agree, but I mean, the whole point is that if you have a set of rules to follow and they're quite clear, then your mind has these clear categories, and then you might feel worse for breaking them than somebody who hasn't got clear rules in his mind, and just isn't that bothered. And I think there is a clear difference between the way Jews and Muslims think and the way Christians think these days, because Christianity doesn't have clear rules. I mean, it doesn't even enforce, the totemic Trinity, because that's really what Christians are supposed to believe, and they actually don't like talking about that
Well, I mean,
because I suppose they think it could be idolatry.
one of the things that I've came to consistent agreement with Khalid on, at least in a Orthodox version of Judaism similar to Islam, is the process. Like, you're not born perfect, you're born flawed, and you become better through a process. And like I said, the natural, you're not born knowing the rules. You have to learn the rules and then adapt your behavior to the rules, whether you like it or
Hmm.
not. And
Hmm.
in that sense, me and him are both in agreement in that. So Islam and Judaism both provide this rules-based order. They both have a system where you're not expected to know the rules, but you're expected to learn them. But then at some point, you're held accountable, and not having been taught or knowing the rules is no longer um, an excuse. And like Khalid and I've somewhat agreed, although like I'm not sure if you remember his point about kind of in the West, like you're perfect as you are. And I explained to him, I think it comes more from Hinduism, that kind of like everything is good as it is. That I'm also largely a critic of, although I would accept that it was a legitimate part of like Hindu theology, or there is a possible way, like Church of Entropy kind of looks at like, I didn't go through any process, I was always perfect type thing. That is part of Hinduism, like Church of Entropy exemplifies that. But I
Hmm.
also largely agree with that criticism that's problematic, because people need to recognize that you get better by going through a process.
Yes,
I'm
we,
not
we,
sure if
we
you
should
find that
always,
consistent
check
for you.
for errors and flaws and mistakes, and adopt a habit of humility, so we're more prepared to accept correction for
Yeah, that's been a
for our own
consistent.
benefit, really.
Yeah, I'm just saying that's been a consistent theme in maybe like 10 times I've streamed with. I think all the time, something that we've generally agreed about, and I would assume that you would also fall into the same school, and that is me and Khalid, that like, you know, yeah, there's a process you have to go through.
Yes, well, even the Christians say that pride is a deadly sin, in the sense that if you're so prideful, you refuse to admit mistakes. It could turn out to be, a deadly error through
And
not
so E.
admitting
Michael
your
Jones,
mistakes.
if this is a heresy, it's became very popular in Western Christianity. That's like, you know, like the gay, you're good if you're gay, you're good if you're good if you sin anyways. And so E. Michael Jones pushing back is really just giving the traditional Christian Catholic view, that like, no, like there is punishment for sin, you can't sin and get away with it. That somehow modern mainstream Christianity has like you basically like neutral on like whether like there's punishment for sin, or like whether you could be perfect, as you are, you're born perfect. But it's saying that, yeah, these are basically all historically Christian heresies, even though they dominate most Western church today.
Have you heard of something called moralistic therapeutic deism?
I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, is like a new age.
Yeah, well,
Is
it's something that a sociologist called Christian Smith noticed that well-behaved American teenagers seem to believe in, which is that, there is God and good people go to heaven, and don't worry too much about scripture and rules. Kind of,
okay. So it's a
vagueness.
sociological term. It's not a church or religion. It's a term by a
Oh no.
sociologist to describe.
But according to Paul van der Klee, this Calvinist pastor, he's saying this is what the government is trying to impose on Americans, because it's kind of cheap spirituality, I suppose. If you think, well, everybody's sort of good enough and don't worry about it, you're going to get to heaven, in the way that the Pope Francis said, everyone has a reasonable chance of getting to heaven. And this really outraged the traditional Catholics, because they must have wondered, well, what was all this, Catholic guilt that we, have felt for so long? What was that about? And our extra long masses and confession and all the, the extra stuff they had to do. If everyone has
If
a
you want to be
reasonable chance of getting to heaven.
if you want to be academic, you have to at least factor in, and often it has to be your main factor, is like the theory of consciousness, psychological makeup, and you're most likely going to fall into like what's predictive processing. And so it doesn't matter that there's contradictions, like through cognitive dissonance, or what they call modularization of the mind. The a person's mind per force has to make patterns, and the requirement to categorize the world supersedes the fact that the categorization is contradictory. So if you have like modern young people, and like I said, like people are very superstitious. So yes, like you have a modern phenomenon shaped by mostly environmental factors that has caused like a general way in the youth where you have like these general factors. But yeah, people are spiritual. Like atheism is not popular. In order for people to maintain atheism, they usually have to be highly educated. They have to take advanced chemistry, biology, or physics. But if you haven't had like a strong grounding in scientific education, you're not likely to understand scientific explanations for day-to-day phenomenon, and eventually you're going to revert to a superstitious worldview. And so your average person is probably related to the decline in educational standards, especially math and science, is an increase in superstition.
Yes.
And
So,
but
but
that's
I
just the
think you could
patterns
say
of
that God
force.
is a superstition. If you think God,
Wait,
causes stuff and performs miracles,
well, I mean,
isn't
the
that a
mind
form of
forces
superstition?
I'm just saying the mind forces categorization at some point. If you're like a child, and like at some point you need to create a self-identity, and you need, like a general narrative of how you're perceived by other people, and that's usually going to be done through like putting yourself in a general category, and that could be, religious. I'm an atheist, I'm a agnostic, I'm a Jew, or I believe, I pray, I don't. And that will become a central part of your identity, not only through how you see yourself but how other people see you. And you'd have to go through an identity crisis for that to change, to how that to you changing how you see yourself and adapting to how other people might see you, or like the dissonance between how you see yourself and how you see others. But at a certain point, there's natural, like Erickson calls them, these stages of identity crisis development, but you hit these points where you have these forced identity crises where there's contradictions in life that don't go together, and then you have to redefine yourself, mostly related to like growing up and responsibilities, or various things. But you always have to look to that explanation for anything, like, saying what's going on in a person's mind, and just appreciate that people basically have no choice but to patronize and categorize what they perceive, and that's going to affect how they function in the world. And as you have changing times, it's people. I mean, so I mean that's insightful what you said. When you said it, immediately sounded like, yeah, that's a pretty good categorization of the phenomenon that I perceive. Like saying that description of reality matches my perception of reality.
Yeah, so it sounds like we have identity issues. Of course we always have an identity, but whether we like our identity is a different matter. Um,
When the
but
distance by how we view ourselves and how others view us.
yes, yes. So it's
At
about
some point, some
which
point we'll have to
which
resolve the
gang
distance.
can we join to raise our status, and will they accept us, and will we be happy in that gang, or should we have just stayed in the where we were, where things were easier. All these considerations begin as we socialize, go to school. Who you know who's going to be my friend, which group of people should I hang out with. I guess we're
Well,
Americans,
I'm
am I a
making a fine
cheerleader,
point.
or am I a geek, or jock, or
Yeah,
whatever?
that's all right. I'm making a fine point though, is you naturally have a period where your self identity starts to clash with how other people perceive you, and that always causes an identity crisis. And usually people have to modify their self-conception, because it's very difficult to control your how other people perceive you, especially if you're a child, how your parents or siblings or teachers perceive you. And so it's this forced modification of accepting reality. At some point, my self identity does not correspond with the reality of how other people see me. Therefore, I'm going to adapt and change my self perception to be more in line with how other people perceive me. And to some extent, like that's the explanatory mechanism for almost all human behavior.
Yes, and I think our beliefs have to change to adapt to circumstances, I suppose. And
If you
sometimes we're sort of made to accept it, like, well, perhaps I'm not as talented and beautiful because I haven't got the best boyfriend, or whatever it is.
Well,
I
it goes
mean,
back to
we want to think of ourselves as attractive and good and successful, but maybe we're not.
no, I mean saying that's the point of the high birth, because you don't want to have to figure it out for yourself. If you take high birth, you have trustworthy, good parents who know what's important and tell you what's important, and have resources of protection for you to the current situation of the world. But if you take low birth, your parents not only do not have an accurate perception of the current state of the world, they don't have necessarily preparation for even anything useful to teach you, or preparation for the world. So largely you have to, and you could put in terms of like the rules-based order. If you take high birth, your parents are going to explain to you and make sure that you're operating within the rules-based order. If you take low birth, you're not even going to be aware of the rules-based order. You're going to come across it through, trial and error, largely from being punished for violating it. And it's going to take you decades or effort, or maybe in your whole lifetime, you're never even going to understand the origin or the process of the rules that you operate under, how they were made, and how they function, unless you dedicate, serious effort and study just to understand the rules. And so, like, religiously, that's, so it's important, like, to say, when did you learn about the rules? So if you're Jewish, like, so when you're 13, like, when you're 13, you're supposed to submit to the rules. You should know about
What
the
for
rules,
your
like,
bar mitzvah?
yeah, but I mean, when you're bar mitzvah at 13, like, you're submitting, like, I know the rules and I'm going to follow them. Like, I took that
And
oath.
you
I had a
become
bar mitzvah.
responsible for your own sins. But before that, your parents were responsible for your sins. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's a coming of
but
age
I mean,
ceremony.
even this coming of age ceremony, I mean, it's helpful. It concentrates the mind. I guess you'll remember your bar mitzvah. When you're told that,
Well, I'm saying
your
it's the
parents are no
rules
longer
based.
responsible for your sins.
If you're a good Jew, you have until you're 13 to understand and comply with the basics of the rules based order. As if you took lower birth, you might not even heard of the rules based order until you come into the wrong side of it, and then it might be very difficult to understand even the origin of the rules based order, how it's coming to be, how it's being implemented. But I mean, Judaism just has this mechanism, like, there's a rules based order, and you have to know about it by the time you're 13, and um, that's a positive aspect.
Which is
Like
the age
even
of
with, like,
criminal responsibility, isn't it?
well, yeah, I'm saying that's a beautiful thing about Judaism. Part of, like, the success, whatever the creation of Jewish group strategy that allowed Jews to be in the position that we're in today was probably created by these type things. And it's like Church of Entry, like Meta. It like to operate, talk about the level of rules, and but yeah, appreciate the conversation. Any updates or major things you're doing in your streaming?
No, I'm just exploring new ways of explaining to Americans that the founding fathers were proto-Muslim, that the First Amendment is supported by a verse in the Quran that allows freedom of belief and expression and the right to express incorrect opinions, and this is necessary for rational and civil discourse, which I fear is rapidly being lost.
And you're actively making the rounds of micro streamers or whatever larger
I,
platforms you get.
Yeah, I mean, I'm mostly on X. But recently I found that a lot of people are just kind of repeating my ideas, such as Mel Kay on the Duran. She was talking about George Washington's farewell speech, and I've been going on to any American, and they say things to me, but it's such archaic language. I can't be expected to read it. And Elliot was saying, "Do you realize how illiterate and stupid and ADHD the average American is? They won't even be able to understand, you know, the speech, and of course it's full of very long sentences and complicated ideas. But I was very happy to hear Mel Kay talking about his farewell speech and talking about the CIA and the deep state, and I guess I'm saying that it's the three-letter agency that controls America more than the JEW. And
Yeah, I mean, it's
yes,
good to keep a positive outlook, and say,
yes.
but yeah, good. Glad. Thanks for reaching out. Thanks for allowing me to share my views and discuss the realm of topics, and react to E. Michael Jones, or my last few months of stream with Khalid, who I met through you. So props for
Yes.
that. Blessings, and to talk again, or people reach out, social media, or comment or something if anyone has anything to
Yes.
share.
Yes, we'll keep in touch, and thank you so much for coming. Take care and good night.
Ciao.